Hello, my name is Lilian Okibe. Welcome to my channel. Lately, I've been getting so many questions and so many DMs from you guys concerning thinning locks at the root. So in today's video, we're going to be talking all about that. So we'll be discussing what can be causing your locks to thin out at the roots and what you can do to fix it. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, then please keep on watching. We'll first start by talking about the causes of thinning locks. Now, the first and like the most obvious reason why your locks may be thinning out, and I feel like this is the category that so many people fall under, is that you're wearing tight styles too often, or you're retwisting your locks or interlocking or crocheting or basically maintaining your locks too tight. Your styles don't have to be tight. Your retwist and like your maintenance doesn't have to be tight for your hair to look neat and put together and presentable. Like, that is a lie. Like, your hair can look really neat and cute and put together even when you're not wearing tight styles, and even when you have not retwisted or maintained your locks tightly. The only thing that wearing tight styles or retwisting tightly does is it causes breakage, thinning of locks, hair loss, alopecia, and it can even lead to permanent balding. So I highly recommend that you guys should stay away from tight styles. At this point, I've said this so many times that sometimes I feel like I'm beginning to sound like a broken record because I say this all the time. But you guys, like, stop wearing tight styles, and whenever you retwist or interlock or maintain, stop doing it too tight. Like, if after you have maintained your locks, if after you have retwisted or interlocked or crocheted your locks, if you can feel pain, if you cannot lie down, if you cannot sleep comfortably after doing a style or maintaining your locks, then that's a huge sign that you have done it too tight. Hair should not be painful. I know that so many of us have very high tolerance for pain, but seriously, I'm telling you guys, hair should not be painful. The more often you do those tight styles or those tight retwists and the likes, the higher your chances of developing thinning of locks. Another thing that can be causing your locks to thin out at the root is that you're retwisting your locks too often, or you're interlocking or crocheting, whatever, you are maintaining your locks too often. I shared one video earlier a few months ago on my TikTok. I'm going to put a link down here to give you guys an idea of like how often you should be retwisting or maintaining your locks. Like, there's no fixed rule that says okay, you should be maintaining or retwisting your locks every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or thereabout. Like, there's really no rule that says that. But how often you should be retwisting your hair depends on how tight you are retwisting in the first place, right? So if you're someone that you're always retwisting tightly and then you're doing it every month, like, that may be too much for your hair. And another thing that you want to pay attention to is how fragile your hair is. Like, some people have very stubborn, like, when I say stubborn, I mean hair that has a higher resistance to tension, right? While some other people have very fragile hair. Like, if you put your hair through just a little bit of tension, like, your hair uproots, right? So I feel like everyone should know their hair, and everyone should know like how frequent of a retwist that your hair can take, right? But generally speaking, I feel like if you're doing the normal maintenance, like how most people retwist their locks, I feel like you should not be doing it anything more than once a month. That's my own personal advice. Now, another reason why your locks may be thin at the roots is something that many people don't talk about, and this is because you're popping your locks. This is something that so many people do, especially when they are like maybe on a semi-freeform journey, when they are going long without retwisting their locks, or even when they are constantly retwisting their locks when they go ahead to maintain their locks. So many people believe in popping of locks. Popping of locks can damage your hair, and popping of locks is one of the reasons why so many people are walking around with damaged hair. Now, let me explain it to you. This is one lock, right? And then you have loose strands that are connected from my scalp down into this lock. Now, as my hair grows and as my hair sheds, right, you have hair that sheds from the root of my scalp, like from my roots, hair sheds and falls into this lock. And that's one of the things that contributes to why, as the longer you stay on your lock journey, the thicker your locks become, because your hair is constantly shedding into the lock. It doesn't fall out because now it is bound. So as my hair sheds from the roots, it sheds into the lock without falling out, right? But the thing about the natural shedding process is after your hair sheds, like as your strands shed, new hair grows from that follicle that old hair shed from, right? So it's a continuous process of you know, hair growing, hair shedding, and hair is constantly being fed into your locks, and that's why your locks keep getting thicker and thicker. Now when you go ahead and pop your locks, what you do is, many times what many people do is, as they pop their locks, they go ahead and like break out strands of hair from the roots from the lock. So what happens is, normally you have is, let's say we have like 50 strands of hair in this lock or a normal day. Now when you go ahead and pop your locks carelessly, what happens is, many people go ahead and break out, let's say you break out 10 strands out of those 50 strands out of that lock. What happens, before you had 50 strands continuously growing and shedding into that lock. Now when you go ahead and break strands in the name of popping out, let's say you break out 10 strands, you no longer have 50 strands, now you have 40 strands. Of course, you cannot say that there's no way that the thickness of 40 strands, right, will be the same as the thickness of 50 strands. And if you do that continuously and you do not put and you go ahead and pop your lock such that you are breaking strands from the lock, or you are forcefully uprooting hair from your roots such that it takes a while for that hair to grow back. Like I said earlier, when your hair sheds naturally, after the hair sheds, hair starts to grow again because it is the natural process. You did not forcefully pull out your hair, so hair starts to grow again. But when you forcefully uproot your hair, you know, many people tend to damage that follicle, and it takes a while before that follicle heals and starts to grow new hair again. So that period where there's no hair growing out of that follicle, you have blank space where the hair is no longer being fed into your locks. And so the longer that goes, the thinner your locks are going to become, the thinner that particular lock is going to be. And that's why sometimes you see people that have they have like thick hair, and then they get to a spot where it's like it just thin, their locks just thin out, you know, for like a period before it starts to get thick again. It's all those things like that can contribute to this. So popping of locks is not a good idea. Now it's good to separate your locks. Nobody says that you should not separate your locks, but when you go ahead and separate your locks, you should carefully feel your locks to see which strand belongs to which lock. Normally when you leave your locks for a while, when it starts to merge, right, you have strands that just, you know, as they are coiling and intertwining, they get entangled with the wrong lock. Now when you go ahead and feel your strands, your hair, to know which strand belongs to which lock, you should carefully and gently pull out the strand from the lock that it doesn't belong to. And you notice that when you do that, when you carefully pull out the strands, you end up not breaking your hair, and you end up not uprooting any hair, and it ends up not being painful. But the problem many of us have is we are very careless and we are in a hurry. We don't want to take our time to, you know, feel our hair, to know, oh, this strand should be here, this strand should not be here. We go ahead, we just take a comb, and this is something that many locticians do. They just go ahead and take a comb and make a part, and any hair that is not in that part, they just go ahead and snap and break and pop, you know, break strands, uproot strands, just to make sure that that part remains there. And that is a problem that is something that will eventually cause problem in your locks over time, because after a while, like I explained earlier, your locks will start to thin at the roots. When that loctician goes ahead to use a comb, like to make that part, and pops and uproots strands of hair just to make sure that that part is clean, they go ahead and put the strands of hair into the wrong lock, and so that wrong lock starts to get thicker, and then you see a certain lock that starts to thin out because the strands that normally should be feeding into that lock has been removed from the lock. I hope that makes sense. Right? And that's another reason why some people end up saying that, oh, they have strands that grow away from the lock. And that's because sometimes when you go ahead and pop your locks, or you go ahead and, you know, remove strands that normally should not be, that should be with the lock, you go ahead and remove it because you're trying to maintain a certain part. What happens is, when you go ahead and put those strands in another lock, it will take a while before that lock will stay in that strand, because it has not been used to being with that new lock, right? It has been used to being with the other lock, so it will keep coming out and coming out and coming out. And that's why you notice that it seems like your hair always grows out of the lock. Like if you leave your hair alone, your hair will find its way to which lock that it wants to be, and it will remain there. Like it's not be growing out of the lock. But what people who have freeform locks do is, they take, let's say you have these two strands now that are somehow starting to connect. What they do is, they go ahead and kind of like pull this apart and just allow it to separate where it naturally wants to separate. That way you're not going to be creating a crispy clean part, right? You're just trying to make sure that the locks grow separately, but the parts will not be clean and clear. Now for people who do that, that's not really popping of locks per se, because that's just basically separating, right? And that way you're not really breaking strands. You're most likely not breaking strands, and you're most likely not uprooting strands, because you're just pulling your hair and allowing it to separate how it naturally wants to separate. That will not give you clean parts. Now when you go ahead and try to make clean parts and you don't carefully like feel your hair to know, okay, this strand is part of this lock, okay, let me not bring it out, okay, this strand should not be part of this lock, let me not be like, when you don't go ahead and do that, you just go ahead and make your parts, let's say with your nails or your raticon, whatever, and just carelessly pull it apart. That is when you pop locks, right? Now the smaller your locks, the more obvious careless popping becomes, right? So, and that's why so many people who have like very small locks, micro locks, sister locks, they tend to experience this like very often, because you don't have so many strands in that lock in the first place. So you cannot afford to be going around breaking strands and uprooting strands, you know, from that lock, because you do not have plenty strands to begin with. And so it's always a good idea that when you go ahead and maintain your locks or separate your locks, you want to make sure that you're only pulling out strand. Like, what if you guys have watched how I reduce my locks, I carefully feel my hair. Like many times I close my eyes when I do, because you really don't, to be honest, you don't need a mirror for this. A mirror will lead you astray. Kind of. A mirror will only help you with the comb, but you actually can. Most times I close my eyes for me to be able to feel that, okay, this strand does not belong to this lock. I feel it. And when you do that, you tend to see that you don't break any strand. When you carefully do that, you remove strands like fully from the lock that it doesn't belong to. Like, it doesn't break, it removes fully. Then you go ahead and put it in the lock where it should be. Another reason why your locks may be thinning at the roots is as a result of balding due to, you know, hereditary factors, or due to health issues, or due to your diet, right? So many people experience balding because it runs in their family. If you're someone like that, there's really not much you can do, because as soon as you start to go bald in that area, like, hair just stops growing from there, and that will eventually lead to thinning. If you have like any health condition that can result in balding, you can also have that issue of like balding. And obviously, if your hair starts to go bald in a certain area, then obviously hair is not growing anymore, and that will eventually lead to thinning of locks. Another thing is your diet. If your diet is not healthy, it will affect your hair growth. Like, there are so many people that think that bald hair, or bald head rather, runs in their family. Meanwhile, it's not necessarily, that's not actually true. It's not like it is a magical thing that, oh, everybody in my family must go bald. But many people go bald. Like, it can become an hereditary thing, or like a generational thing, because you have so many generations of bad hair practices, of so many generations of bad eating, bad diets. Like, that diet has a very, very huge role to play in like the health of your hair. And so many people that are walking around with damaged hair, or like balding, or alopecia and things like that, they think it is maybe a product that they are using, or, oh, my mom has this, so I must have this and all. But sometimes by just improving your diet, eating healthier, eating richer foods, like, so many of all these problems that we go through can actually be solved by just eating better. So wherever you are, whether you're experiencing balding or not, I highly recommend that you switch to a healthy, like a more healthy diet, rich in fresh foods, you know, vegetables, fruits, protein, and all the likes, to, you know, give your hair all the nutrients that it needs, so that you give it the best chance for it to be healthy. Now that we've talked about all the things that can cause thinning of locks at the roots, now let's go ahead and talk about what you can do to prevent it. Now, obviously, what you can do to prevent it is to stop doing all the things that can cause it. So if you are someone that likes to retwist your hair too tight or too often, or you're someone that likes to wear tight hairstyles, you definitely want to, you know, stay away from those kinds of things, or at least reduce it to like the barest minimum. Another thing is you want to make sure that your diet is healthy and rich, so that you're giving your hair the best chance to be healthy. Another thing you can do is stop popping your locks. Stop popping your locks. When you go ahead and maintain your locks or retwist, pay attention, like only bring out strands that do not belong in the lock, and like carefully feel your way. You know, so don't go ahead and snag and break and uproot strands just because you want it to fit in a particular part that you have created, right? Having clean parts is not as important as having healthy hair. There are so many people that, you know, start out with, oh, they want their hair to look perfect. Over time, but by the time they start to go bald, or like their hair starts to thin out, like it's like what's the use of clean part? Because now you have a very wide part because you have uprooted all your hair. Because you are looking to have clean parts when you start out, you want everybody to say, oh, you have clean parts. You go ahead and do all those bad hair practices, popping your locks, uprooting here, uprooting there, and then you end up with very wide parts. Now you don't need a comb to make your parts because your hair is now so bald that your part is now so wide. Like it doesn't, like, if you actually think about it, it's not worth the damage that you're going to experience at the end of the day. So yeah, it's good to have neat and clean parts, but don't focus on clean parts and put your hair or your locks at risk. When you go ahead and maintain your locks, calm down, don't rush it. If you know that you're in a hurry, then leave it for later. Calm down, feel your hair to know where each strand should be. Don't go ahead and just carelessly snag hair and pull hair and, you know, pop hair just because you want it to fit into a certain parts that you have created. Let's go ahead and talk about what you can do to fix thinning of locks at the root. There are different kinds of thinning, you know, that you experience. You have the kind of thinning where you can see that the locks are normal, you know, the length of the locks are normal, but you just have that the locks are thin at the roots, but you have a lot of loose strands around the thinning of the roots. That is mild case. And if that's the case that you have, then thank God it has not gotten that bad. All you have to do to fix the thinning is just to include those loose strands that you have around the thinning, include that back into the lock. You can use whatever method you want to use, like however you normally maintain your locks. You can use that method to just include those loose strands around the thinning. You can just include it into the lock. But it doesn't matter whether you use the retwist method or you use the interlocking method or you use the crochet method. It really doesn't matter, but just include those loose strands around the lock, include it into the lock. But make sure you do it loosely, right? Because what you want to do is you want to bring those strands that you have broken off, right? Or those strands that you have uprooted, but thank God they are finally growing again. So what you want to do, you want to gather those strands and put them back into the lock. Now what that does is, at first when you do that, you see a little bit of improvement, right? But you may still see the thinning. But as your locks mature, like I said earlier, your hair is constantly shedding and the shed hair falls, right? So as shed hair falls, over time it will go ahead and heal the thinning that you have at the root, and after a while you may not notice that thinning again, but it will take a while. It will take a little bit of time, depending on how damaged and how far down the line the thinning has occurred, right? But when you put those loose strands in the lock, that's like you're telling the lock, the strands that, hey, stay here from now on. And if you care for your hair, if you actually pay attention and care for your hair, over time the thinning will fix itself. The lock will actually repair itself. And the second kind of thinning that you may experience is, you notice that the lock has thinned at the root, but you don't have any loose strand around that hair. So if your hair has gotten to that point, that is a very severe case. What you want to do is calm down. It's not the end of the world. Relax, take a deep breath, and just leave your hair alone. Leave all those retwisting. At least, even if you want to retwist the rest of your hair, that part, just leave it alone. Leave it alone. I recommend you apply like Jamaican black castor oil once or twice a week, you know, and massage that area, and just stop retwisting that area and putting it in tight styles and all. What you're trying to do is you're encouraging your hair to start to grow back, because that place is now kind of bald, right? So you're trying to encourage hair to grow back in that area. So you just leave it alone. Don't fret, don't stress about it, just leave it alone. You are going to fix it. It's going to get fixed, but for now, allow it to recover. So leave it alone. All what you need to do is just apply, like, you know, an oil that can stimulate hair growth, and leave it alone until after a few months, when you start to see that hair is obviously growing back. Then you can do what I suggested earlier in my first step, that is, put those loose strands around the lock, and then it will eventually get fixed. what many people do is when they notice that their locks are starting to thin now, they go ahead and take borrowed hair, like extra human hair, and add it to, you know, the thinning. Meanwhile, the scalp is bald. Then they go ahead and add, you know, loose hair into the thing. What you're doing is you're just unnecessarily making that thin part heavy. Yeah, it's going to look like you have fixed the problem, but you're only, you know, making the problem worse, because now you have made that section heavy for the little few strands that are there, and over time you think that you fix the problem, but it will come back again if you do not address the underlying issue. So another option that you can do is to combine that thinning lock to a neighboring lock that is strong. So what that does is it kind of like gives you time to not see the hair, because sometimes when we are constantly seeing that thinning that is there, like, it just upsets us, right? So what you can do is just combine it to a stronger lock. That way you don't get to see it anymore, and it will actually eventually heal itself within that lock that you have combined it with. So that's another option that you can do. But you also want to be very careful when you do this, because if you're not careful when you do this, it may actually result in a problem for you later on. Because if you combine it to a lock that is not really that doesn't really fit into it properly, you're going to have issues along the line. Because when you combine two locks that normally don't want to stay together, you may have headache whenever you maintain or rotate your locks, because now you're pulling locks far away that really don't want to be together, and it may just be painful and stressful for you. So you want to actually be careful that whatever lock that you're combining it with is a lock that naturally will want to stay comfortably with that particular lock. The next thing that you can do to fix the problem is, this is another thing that many people jump into without actually knowing the implication, and that is using a crochet needle to manually fix it. So what many people do is, let's say you have the lock that is thin, they go ahead and bend the lock, like they bend some of the healthy part of the lock into the thinned part, and then they go ahead and use a crochet needle to crochet it together. This is something that this is usually the first option that so many people do, even locticians do, to fix the problem. But what I've noticed is this is not actually a fixing. this is more about hiding the problem more than fixing it, because this doesn't actually fix it. If you do this without actually sorting out the underlying issue that has caused the hair to thin out in the first place, at the end of the day, after a while, it may take maybe a year or so, the damage will come back again. Like sometimes, like, the damage will come back again because you have not fixed the underlying issue. So this is actually more about hiding the damage. Like, this is something I recommend when you have done everything that I have said earlier, and then your hair is growing back again. You have added you have added the loose hair to the thinning lock, and then you have given it some time to like heal itself, but somehow it seems like it's not healing. So let's say you've given it like 6 months for it to heal itself, and it has not like healed itself, then you can go ahead and use a crochet needle to fix it. But this is actually very tricky. You need to be careful, because if you use a crochet needle and if you do it too loose, right, you may end up, like the gravity, especially if it's at the root, the gravity of your lock may, especially if your locks are already long to an extent, the gravity of your lock may actually pull down the hair, and then it will expose the damaged parts all over again and snag some of your hair in the process, right? And especially if you're someone that likes to wear tight styles, you like to do all those your rollers, all those your coils, braids, and all the likes, the gravity may end up pulling the hair and expose the damage again. Now, if you do it too tight, in such a way that you no longer give the lock room for shed hairs to fall lower than that part, because you have gone ahead to over make it, like you have made it too tight and it has become so tight. It's like starting your locks with braids. Like when you start your lock with braids, your locks don't swell up as much, and that's because the space within the braid, you don't have a lot of space within the braid for your loose hair, for like your shed hairs to fall and like thicken the lock. So if you go ahead and crochet too tight, you're going to create a spot, like a barrier spot, that loose hair cannot naturally like fall beyond that point. And so what happens is, after a while, depending on how you maintain your locks, if you actually continue to like maintain your locks and your locks start to grow healthy, you're going to have the lock that is above that point will get thicker and full. while the lock that is from that point below will be thinner because you have made it too tight. So that's, using a crochet needle is actually tricky and that's why I really don't recommend you going and jumping ahead to use a crochet needle without actually knowing what you're getting yourself into, because in the moment it's going to look like you have fixed the problem. Some people even go ahead and add human hair, you know, and crochet it into their locks. At the moment it's going to look like you have fixed the problem, but over time it may start to give you issues, and that's why crochet is not usually the first thing I would advise you to do if you experience thinning. Those are all the tips I have to share with you guys. I hope you guys found this helpful. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if this is your first time on my channel and you like to see more videos from me, then definitely subscribe for more content about locks. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys in my next video.